Ladies and gentlemen, a pleasant good evening to you all. And on behalf of the University of Ghana cohort in the Innovation in Global Development PhD program at KSU, let me welcome you to our second talk series. I'm Sydney Armstrong, and I'll be your moderator for this evening. Today, our focus is on ICT as a tool for inclusive development for emerging economies. And we have with us three distinguished speakers who will help to enhance our understanding of the changing nature of ICT, issue for inclusive development. The discussion today promises to be an exciting one, as it addresses three areas that have continued to dominate the agenda of global discussions, which are ICT, development, and inclusiveness. It is by no coincidence today that we're having this discussion when we celebrate World's Creativity and Innovation Day. Ladies and gentlemen, the significance of information and communication technologies for inclusive development has long been recognized since the rapid growth in the mid-90s. In 1998, for instance, the Commission on Science and Technology for Development published a report titled Knowledge Societies, Innovation Technology for Sustainable Development. The report examined the relationship between ICTs, economic and social development, and the potential for building innovative knowledge societies. The concept of knowledge societies span beyond technology, in the human development processes that transform information into knowledge and enable governments, people, and organizations that effect lasting change in economies and society. There are two broad perspectives on the role of ICT for inclusive development. The first perspective concerns systemic impacts of ICTs on economies, society, and culture, and the second addresses the impact on policymaking. These impacts are becoming increasingly visible worldwide, posing serious challenges to policymakers, especially in emerging countries. For example, automation and computerization have been reducing employment in some sectors, while increasing employment in others. The enabling power of ICTs is exploited by criminals, as well as legitimate businesses, and this raises new challenges of data protection, surveillance, and cybersecurity. Finally, any examination of the notion of ICT as a tool for inclusive development for emerging economies must consider the implications of 5 emerging trends, which are expected to play a major part in ICT for development during the next 5 years. These are datification, big data analysis, cloud computing, the Internet of Things, and smart systems. Ladies and gentlemen, let me beg your indulgence, therefore, to explore our order proceedings this evening. The next segment will have our presentations. Each presenter will be introduced by one of my colleagues. And after the introduction, that presenter will take center stage and deliver a presentation for 10 minutes. After all presentations have been completed, we will move into our question and answer segment, where you'll have an opportunity to interact with our presenters. When the time for the question and answer segment expires, yours truly will return to deliver the closing remarks. Last but not least, my colleague, Mr. Patrick Ketwaru, will be called upon to complete the program with the vote of thanks. My distinguished audience, thank you for your patience, and without further ado, let me call upon my colleague, Ms. Diana Citran, to introduce our first speaker. Diana.
Thank you, Sydney. It is my honor to introduce our first panelist, Dr. Eusebio Scornavacca. Dr. Scornavacca is the Parson Professor of Digital Innovation at the University of Baltimore and Director of the Center for Digital Communication, Commerce, and Culture. He holds a J&M Thompson Chair in Management Information Systems at the Merrick School of Business. Prior to joining the University of Baltimore, he was Director of Research at the School of Information Management, Victoria University of Wellington in New Zealand. He has held visiting positions in several countries, including Japan, China, Italy, and Morocco, to name a few. He is globally engaged in a number of research initiatives investigating the impact of emerging digital technologies at the individual, organizational, and societal levels. His research interests include disruptive digital innovation, digital ecosystems, ICT for development, algorithm delegation, and digital entrepreneurship. During the past 20 years, he has conducted research in a wide range of industries, and his research has appeared in leading journals. He serves on several editorial boards and conference committees. Without further ado, I hand you over to Dr. Scornavacca. Sorry,
Thank you,
my
Diana.
apologies.
No, perfect. And I'm also pleased to be able to share that in a couple months or a little bit more, I'll be able to call everyone at ASU my colleagues as I'll be joining SFIS and Thunderbird. So it's a very exciting time. Thank you so much for the kind invitation. Let me share my screen with you guys and we go from there. Really? Okay, there we go. Can you see? Okay, good. So once again, thank you so much. I'm very excited to be here, and also as a privilege to be shared with you some ideas on digital disruption and ICT for D. What I'll do, I'll initially set the scene, talking more on the issues of disruption, and then Katina will be falling more into the issues of inclusiveness. So the first thing we need to really start to thinking about is the emergence of a digital ecosystem. You have a number of different technologies that were brewing in different aspects, like, for example, wireless telecommunications, you had the internet, and more what you see is a number of those technologies converging into systems such as your smartphone. If you think about, if you go to a Radio Shack on the 90s, every single a device that was sold there is actually in your smartphone. The camera, the computer, the audio system, the television. So you see a number of those technologies converging and creating a fluid ecosystem. Another thing is extremely important for us to understand is that cost, as those costs diminish, these technologies, they become more accessible, they become more embedded into our lives. So if you think about, we can think of three different stages that this technology was actually coming to our place. So if you think on the idea that we can do tasks with support of information and communication technologies, for a long time, it was bound to our workplace. We had to be at our desktop to be able to have access to that technology. That's the stationary stage. What I'm doing here, I'm looking at space and time, and I'm looking at the movement of people here, and that's the only area where the technology was available. Then we go to the network stage where people had their PCs at home with dial-up internet, and you had internet cafes and so forth. And you can see here that during the day on the movement of this person here, there is an expansion of time and space that these technologies were available. Once we pass to the development of basically smartphones and internet-enabled mobile devices, you see this expansion here, basically going the entire day of this person having access to an ICT connected device. So the real disruption that is happening here is in relation of time, space, interactivity, and the tasks that we're able to do with the support of ICT. Now, there are a few things that are enabling all this disruption that we are experiencing. The first one is digitalization, is the idea that the function is no longer constrained by form, and you create a number of digital artifacts that may complement physical artifacts into cyber-physical systems, but at the same time, you have a number of systems and product services that are fully digital. The other element that is really important is the ubiquity or the embeddedness of this ecosystem. It's basically anywhere, with everyone, on everything, right? Of course, this is an exaggeration, but you've seen this, if you think about water spreading, this is what you've seen of this digital ecosystem. But the other element that is extremely disruptive is the network effect and the generativity that it creates. Because the digital ecosystem is naturally connected, it has a snowball effect very quickly because of the network, but at the same time may be able to drive an anticipated innovation because of the combinatorial complexity that is there. But one of the important things is that we get fascinated with the shiny box. with the technology behind this. And we have to start to look beyond it. If we really want to think about positive socioeconomical and environmental impact, we need to look at the disruption that this technology is creating, or these technologies are creating, rather than looking at the disruptor, which a lot of times, people think of 5G, people think of phones, people think of AI, right? We need to look beyond the technology, but actually look at the disruption that this technology, the affordances of these technologies are doing. The other element here is to shift our focus that comes a lot of times into performance gains. We think about as the designers of these technologies, how this technology can allow us to gain performance. Does it mean that we gain social outcomes on this? Not necessarily. So we need to switch the kind of look into, or the focus on this. The other element that is extremely important here is to look at to understand really the adoption and exploitation of technology in light of the socioeconomic context that is happening. One of the big issues is that a lot of technology is designed in this environment here. I Googled the word digital innovation and software development. Look at the pictures that show up. And by the way, all facilities in this slide are fully climatized with air conditioning, and flavored sparkling water was actually available to all participants. On the other hand, the pervasiveness of these technologies does this. It brings to those environments. This is a picture that I took in China, where you have two people here on their mid-60s doing a transaction payment, buying mushrooms in a market in the outskirts of Dalian. This is a recycling plant in Brazil, where people are basically collecting, paper, glass, and other, materials, and they're actually using WhatsApp and other forms of other applications to actually basically coordinate the logistics of the collection. This is a picture of Makola Market in Ghana, in Accra. And one of the things that you see here, the market is divided into the food section, the clothing section, the hardware section, and the smartphone section. So you can see the pervasiveness of these technologies in a very different setting than where it was designed. What it does, it paves the way to what I call paradox technologies that can produce many different outcomes. For example, this one is in Kenya, that there is on the Champions League, they do a lot of gambling. It's actually considered an epidemic in the country. Young lads here actually betting with their phones that were supposed to be used to get information. So you have also the issues of the paradox of openness. So some of the policies, for example, as data sharing that may come into place, they may enhance the benefits of the companies, but at the same time may go counter the consumers or the users or the citizens that you're talking. So there are tensions there. The same way that we can think that the democratization of technology, that the means of production and distribution, suddenly you have a Brazilian YouTuber being able to produce video and distribute video. But we have to understand that there is a big paradox there in terms of value creation and appropriation. So all this technology comes with a price. The issues is that a lot of times when you think about digital divide, usually it is focused on access and skills. And the most important thing that should be focusing here is really trying to understand and evaluate what outcomes exist from our fully constant, always connected life. And those are big challenges that is important to look at the context that these technologies are being used. So when we think about digital disruption and ICT, we should be looking at what is the public interest that comes into this because of the pervasive nature of this. There's a necessity here to look really and understand the essence of those ecosystems and look at goals that go beyond myopic, I would say, performance gains, but really understand or reevaluating what means by value. At the end of the day, we should be looking here at understanding what is the actual impact of technology and what is the actual value of technology to society. How does it contribute directly to create an inclusive and sustainable future? And some people do that. Here's some examples that I want to share quickly to wrap up as a brief introduction. Giraffe in South Africa is using basically AI technology to help people to find employment, but it is simplified in a way that people can get quick, like a very simple CV. So it increases the ability of people, especially in low income, to access jobs. Bitland in Ghana is allowing to use a combination of GPS technology and blockchain to provide land titles. Banco Palmas in Brazil is allowing basically digital social cryptocurrencies that is really providing an injection of capital into entrepreneurial activity in many slums of Brazil. And the last one is Pedigree in Ghana that is using technology to validate medicine and actually fighting an epidemic of counterfeit medicine that kills about 150,000 people every year in Africa. So the key element here to wrap up, and I'm about to my 10 minutes, we need to really understand the affordances of the technology, the context, the socio-technical context that it does, and really focus how it can be used to provide positive social, economic, and environmental impact. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Eusebio. So I'm gonna, please permit me to refer to you as Dr. Eusebio. I'm not gonna try your last name. My Italian is
fine.
Excellent presentation. I'm certain that our attendees would have a lot of questions based on the impact, the social and economic impact of some of these technologies, like you rightfully mentioned. Ladies and gentlemen, let me call upon my colleague, Mr. Dwayne Renville, to introduce the second speaker. Dwayne?
Thank you, Sydney. Hello all. Our second panelist is Dr. Katina Michael, and she is a professor in the School for the Future of Innovation in Society, as well as the School of Computing, Informatics, and Decision Systems Engineering, both at the Arizona State University. Prior to ASU, Dr. Michael served in senior academic positions at a variety of top academic institutions in Australia, China, the United Kingdom, and Singapore. Complementing her academic prowess, Dr. Michael served as a senior network engineer, and as a systems analyst with international companies. It does not stop here, as Dr. Michael has published 6 edited books, as well as co-authored 2 500-page reference volumes in ICT. Additionally, Dr. Michael has written more than 200 peer-reviewed papers where her researches are predominantly in the area of emerging technologies and technologies used for national security and their corresponding social implications. Further, Dr. Michael has served in various editorial capacities of many academic proceedings, journals, and magazines, and is the founding editor-in-chief of the IEEE Transactions on Technology and Society, which was launched in 2020. Ladies and gentlemen, in the business of academia, and for such academic sessions as this one, it is fitting to hear from the best in the respective fields. Therefore, I take great pleasure in presenting to you one of the very best, Dr. Katina Michael.
Thank you so much, Dwayne and Sydney. And what a wonderful presentation, Eusebio. Thank you so much for the preparation and for helping to organize Eldon and myself, and to all in the background who have been working so hard. What a turnout today. I'm looking at the numbers, and it's not numbers in this space, it's always heart. But it's a joy to be with you and to be sharing with you. Today, I will leave the technology talk to our last speaker, and we'll talk about process. I will begin by saying that we live in a complex system that's always adapting, and we can progress through various kinds of theoretical frameworks and approaches to understanding what is going on in this world around us that we call Earth. And together in our respective relationships that are multiple, and there's a multiplicity of them as we connect with one another, we may find ourselves in different areas. I have found myself beginning with systems theory, moving on to networks, where I spent a good chunk of my life deploying global networks and wide area networks, both broadband and wireless, and would you believe even wireline? That's how old I am. In some parts of the world, there was still this need for plain old telephone lines as the world was adapting. And then collective behavior, something that I've been heavily influenced by Professor Jeremy Pitt at Imperial College London, where we looked at collective action, collective understanding. And if we all read the position paper that has been given to us in preparation for this wonderful event, we can see that ICT for development encapsulates both the individualistic behavior and the collective behavior in unison. The writings actually encapsulate both. So I just want to say to you, while I dabble in other areas, my main focus is systems theory right through to networks and internetworking and to collective action and behavior influenced by many people around me. And when we look at the organizational perspective, I mean, the first year at university at UTS, this was what was given to me by Professor David Wilson in some form. When we look at the interplay between the social and technical systems, structure, people, technology, and tasks. And mainly this was within an organizational setting. This was a particular business where you looked at business processes, where you developed databases for something, where you had tasks that were oriented towards specialized people in their demarcated roles. And you had this thing called hardware, and you would build software, and all of these things interact. But as I later realized when I entered academia, about 70% of large-scale ICT projects fail. And here I'm predominantly talking about organizational specific. As time went on, we decided to get very, very clear about the systems development lifecycle, which is something that is used usually towards software development. This is again where my background is and where we began. So think about it as Gates, the organization I worked for, Nortel Networks, had a software side that actually was coupled with its hardware. So we sold large public switching networks and digital switching. We were the company responsible for introducing digital switches in the 60s and 70s. And thereon, the introduction of PEAPX and other wide area systems based on first the ATM protocols and then migrating to IP, Internet Protocol, where we saw a right angle shift. So the software side had gates. You know, you start a project, you initiate it, you have a systems concept development, you do planning, you go through these stages and you detail and you store information about each gate and you declare a gate complete before you get to the next gate. And it's a linear process. And once you go through this process between 12 months and 1.5 years, depends on the size of the project, you declare it finished and you go live and you're in operation and you leave the production stage and the development stage. But really, this is an insular look at a process which is no longer linear and is no longer closed. We're not talking about closed systems anymore. We really are talking about open systems, where there is an input. In this incredible world we live in, there's an open system and there are outputs. And the open system may well be something that doesn't have clear boundaries. It's a dotted line boundary setting field. And so there's an input, there's a process, and there's an output. And we can talk about open systems as opposed to closed systems in organizations, although increasingly organizations also have extranets, right? Extra networking. And they also work within global exchanges that are not so insular anymore. And so, you know, some of the earlier writings talk about the turbulent environment. How turbulent has it become today? Well, it's become very complex and very adaptive and very changeable. How do we operate in a world that constantly is shifting? We have some management scholars like Henry Mintzberg who was so once very much saying, well, how can we plan for anything? Change happens every day. By the time I've written my strategic plan, it's already old and obsolete, and I move on. And so what we're looking at is the differentiation between design processes and linear processes of the 60s, 70s, and 80s, which talked about an owner, like an architect and a contractor. Off you go, you build, and that's it. And today, we're talking about something different. One of the reasons we believe that systems have failed at a large scale is because they have had this relationship of a traditional design process, whereby I look at someone, I observe them over there, and I think that's what they need, and I go and build it. Whereas what we're really talking about today is engagement with the stakeholders, bringing stakeholders around the table to actually go through those stages. And while the stages are somewhat still linear, I engage, I collaborate, I participate, I prototype, I launch, I go live. We are talking about a different mindset. I do want you to think about a round table. I do want you to think about citizens at the round table, inclusive of voices such as regulators, other stakeholders, such as the business owner potentially, or the government agency requiring the service, or the community that has demanded a need for something. And rather than doing this for the user, the concept now in the co-design world is with the user. In fact, we empower the user. And what we are doing in this socio-technical system, a paper here from 2014, we're looking at the interplay between the human and social dimensions, the technical system we're designing for or with the human and social dimensions. And we acknowledge that we are operating in an environment which is complex and has a number of conditions and constraints and resource issues, and actually is espoused in the physical world. And so it's this interplay that's called socio-technical systems design. And here I want you to see how close we have to become to the user.
To my absolute delight, here we have more soldier crabs. Now, the whole idea of this viewing has to do with the process of co-design. If I'm quiet, you can hear them scuttle. The incredible thing is, I want you to think, oh, here's a slow one. Come on, baby. Now, the idea of this is society, right? This is like a metaphor for society. How do you find out what every single person wants to happen with regards to technology? And so there has to be some collective understanding. But even though these soldier crabs look absolutely homogeneous, they look the same, that one, that one, that one, they probably all think different things. This one has just gone and hidden itself. This one keeps going, and this one's in the process of hiding itself. This one's confused, okay, I'm going to go under as well. But you can see all of these soldier crabs actually are doing something. They're going somewhere. They're thinking something, and they seem to be coming off the beach. Here we are at Sever Beach in Ben Boyd National Park. But how do you actually find out what everyone wants? I mean,
and that's the whole thing. How do we find out what everybody wants? That's a good question. And we can observe users, we can listen to users, we can watch users, we can be in situ with users, we can understand their cultural context, we can ask them questions about their needs. But we need to be actively listening as designers. And we need to be designing with our users, because they are ultimately the expert designers. So we talk about this process of coming together in co-design, in overcoming pains that people may have and satisfying their needs. And so how to overcome the pains by offering holistic solutions that actually work for the local constituency. We empower citizens to build because they are the true co-designers. They have the lived experience, and what the designers have on the UX side, for example, or the actual design thinking or systems engineering, they have the professional expertise. And while we have the professional expertise on one hand and the lived experience on the other, we're doing this handshake. It's what's called a protocol. We come together, we listen actively to one another. And so the key issues that came up in the project and paper that was produced by the team here behind this wonderful workshop: grassroots, bottom up, community-led. It's not even co-design. I think we're moving to an empowerment model of community-led design, not just participatory design, inclusive design, consultative design, but actually Indigenous inspired knowledge design, right? Or community-led design. It is about being on an equal footing. It's about appropriate technology and appropriation. It's about innovation, empowerment, and entrepreneurship. It's about going through this process, not in a linear way, but in a way that says we acknowledge the turbulence and meshed context that we live in. Sure, there are still stages, but these stages are iterative and we keep going, producing together. And so when we leave a particular development area, we don't leave a mess behind, we leave empowerment where the local users and the local constituency feel that empowered that they can continue with a project and a product process that actually works into the longer term. And here I just show you some quick footage of what I mean about difference, even in homogeneity, even in perceived homogeneity.
So when we work in communities and we're trying to figure out what communities want, we've got to first locate the community. I mean, here's a community of birds. Okay, a couple of flocks. We've got white birds, fairly large with long beaks, and then we've got black birds that have a smaller beak, but they seem quite happy to be co-located on the same sort of mound, and they're sure of each other. They know they're not going to attack each other. They're going to work in cooperation there. But the thing is, oh, here are some seagulls. What are they waiting for? They're all waiting for fish. Fish that's going to come in from this beautiful Kianini Bay, and they'll take whatever they can from the scraps that the fishermen leave behind. But what does it take? Does it take understanding? Does it take cooperation?
And so we're talking about cooperation, and here I want to go beyond cooperation, collaboration, and capacity building, looking at the designer's knowledge, those with the professional skills, look at the participants' knowledge, and then coming together to actually build within a society and culture. And this is about engagement. It's about listening to the local residents. It's about getting to know the community. It's about building trust in neighborhoods. It's about empowering neighborhoods to participate in the design process, to say, actually, we're doing this together because we have together identified the needs, and together we will meet them with respect of cultural issues and other notions of sustainability in the local community. And so I go full circle back to Lewis Mumford and his influence, Patrick Geeds, who talks about acts, deeds, facts, and thoughts. And I want to leave you with this notion of mental models. We have a current mental model, we innovate, we create new mental models, and we reimagine. Well, do these mental models align with my value system? Am I being sensitive to the world around me? Do I need to make a change in my own personal mental model to fit within a collective so that we have harmony? And this is where we go from the real things and processes to mental models to conceptualization. And we go from the physical world to the one that I perceive in my head, and then the one that I want to roll out using technology and science. So I'll leave you with those thoughts, and thank you for listening. And I hope you were inspired by the birds, the pelicans in Australia, but also the soldier crabs, because that's us, ladies and gentlemen. We're the users, and we have to be together to cooperate. So I hope I leave you with those two images.
Thank you, Dr. Michael, for such a wonderful presentation. I think when I go walking on the beach from today, I'll pay more careful attention to the movements of those crabs. I always try to stay away from them. Now that to understand that they're operating in a complex system, and it's important for one to pay attention to these smaller things. There's a lot that we can learn from things like this here. There's some questions I am certain that our audience are waiting to ask, and so we'll have the final presentation, and then we'll get into our question and answer segment. So I would like to call on my colleague, Ms. Ella Benjamin, to introduce our third and final presenter for this afternoon. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. It gives me great pleasure to introduce our third and final panelist for this evening presentation. Our next panelist is a social techpreneur, technology-focused social entrepreneur, who has worked in the field of information technology as a practitioner for over 17 years. This distinguished gentleman has founded companies, started movements, mentored and created empowering opportunities for thousands of innovators in Guyana. He was also a faculty member at the University of Guyana within the Department of Computer Science for 13 years. During his time there at the University of Guyana, he founded the social impact-led tech community, which to date has evolved into a for-profit conversational artificial intelligence tech company, V75 Inc., with a nonprofit counterpart, Nexus Hub Inc. These companies focus are on youth development and tech ecosystem growth in Guyana. Ladies and gentlemen, without any further delay, I will hand you over to Mr. Eldon Marks.
Thank you, Shanella. And it's a pleasure being here. Those are very thought-provoking presentations. And allow me to share my screen, and I will begin. So I've been asked to share with you the idea of ICT4D in the Guyanese context, and to do so, I'd like to tell a story. It's about this journey that started so many years ago, and the journey is pretty much impact focused, and it focused on the development of, or the investment of investment in Guyana's intellectual capital through the technology industry. And that began in 2014, and it began, as a very simple community, but it grew into one of Guyana's largest technology companies, as well as the nation's, and possibly the region's only conversational AI firm. And it operates in tandem with a progressive nonprofit arm focused on tech ecosystem growth and youth development, and that's Nexus Hub Inc. And here's a view of the individuals within that particular company, and the entire journey effectively began in 2017, where the community and I got together to plan the country's first digital industry exhibition. We built an online platform which was designed to index and profile a number of local tech entities and also have them submit their works. And we indexed over 70 local tech entities, both individuals and teams and companies. And we also had them submit their works, and they submitted over 200 plus works, ranging from simple websites all the way to research papers. And that gave us an immense amount of data to look at, to give us an idea of where the tech ecosystem in Guyana was. And in looking at the data, we identified certain impediments to the growth of the local tech ecosystem. Complementing research that we discovered was that collaboration and innovation, they all work together to bring about technological change, and that also has a bearing on global market penetration and ultimately economic growth for development. And what we identified in terms of that data was that there were clear deficits in collaboration, innovation, and global market penetration. And these obviously would have posed certain challenges to this meaningful development of our local tech ecosystem. And we got together, we went back to the drawing board and identified that if we were going to at least contribute positively to the growth of our local tech ecosystem, we would need to address these deficits head on. So we came up with a model, which we call this ecosystem growth model, which focused on collaboration, innovation, and opportunity creation. And we executed this model in the form of a pilot program over 12 months. And we recorded notable achievements and complementing discoveries. So the first achievement through this executed model is that we were able to create specialists. We helped them start their careers in tech. And we also in tandem grew our early stage startup in a single execution. And we did this by partnering with a US-based AI startup. And we organized with them not just knowledge transfer, but the ability to train even more individuals within this conversational AI specialization through apprenticeship programs. And we were able to build a team, a local team of certified competency engineers, AI competency engineers, who later on went on to conversational experiences for over 25 million users worldwide. And to date, we've created opportunities for over 40 plus individuals within our immediate network, comprising full-time employees, apprentices, and interns. And through these opportunities, we've helped to contribute to this retention of our homegrown talent, which is definitely an achievement to write home about. The discovery that we made from this is that collaborating with foreign partners not only improves global market penetration and revenue, but it also helps to create jobs and better trained specialists in the process. There was an immense amount of knowledge transfer working in tandem with an external industry partner. And there was quite a lot of nuances for our individual developers working along with those experienced team members remotely. And it also allowed our early stage firm to leapfrog in development and revenue. And with this added revenue, we were able to relieve ourselves from working from project to project just to keep the lights on, just to pay the bills. And we found that we were able to support innovation more. So we created a culture whereby we had these pet projects and project check-ins on a weekly basis. And much of the work that went into that allowed our members of staff to explore other areas in the form of computer vision and other conversational AI or AI-based stacks that eventually led to us producing our own products and our own complementing AI stacks. The second achievement was that we were able to foster homegrown tech innovations through a unique hackathon model. And this attracted support from IDB and IDB Lab. And we were able to win our first IDB Lab grant from this that powered 2 more HackSolve events. And these events are adapted hackathons where instead of having teams compete, we got everyone together, both technical and non-technical individuals, to collaborate on solving shared problems using technologies. And some notable proofs of concept came out of these events. They were all inspired by problems submitted by the public. And you'll see a glimpse of these examples in a bit. The discovery from this is that collaboration of diverse teams accelerates the innovation process without a doubt. We were able to bring together more than 15 local teams to collaborate and innovate and solve shared problems with technologies. And these particular outputs or proofs of concept, which were built over a period of 3 days, had immense commercialization potential as well, and they represented endogenous innovation, which was quite a discovery from here. The third achievement is that we were able to train over 100 youth, both at the foundational and industrial levels. And we were able to give them a means to translate their raw potential into earning potential through tech career paths. And some of these have launched into their tech careers locally through our apprenticeship programs. The discovery here is that we undoubtedly possess a high concentration of intelligent, talented youth. And once they're given the right conditions for success, they can rise to meet or surpass the expectations of industry. And we've seen this with our own internal team with regards to the conversational AI opportunity. When we began that particular engagement with the external firm, we were one of many partners that they engaged with. Their other partners existed in China and India and even the US. And very quickly, we were able to marginalize the engagement of these partners to the extent whereby to date, we are the only partner that they engage with based on the quality of work and our work ethic. And with this, we realized that our local tech ecosystem needed this talent acquisition capability to be developed so that we can retain that talent. And that mainly speaks of the ability to present to our very talented youth really engaging opportunities. We were able to bring the conversational AI specialization here, which is obviously very engaging and interesting. And it also represents the ability to create jobs and have enough revenue to maintain these individuals locally. What we found is that our current tech ecosystem still needs some work in terms of its talent acquisition capability. It's relatively nascent. And the worrying thing is that our local STEM programs are engaging thousands of talented youth. For instance, STEM Guyana is a very popular nationwide program. And these youth will soon approach the industry level. So the local technology industry has to be prepared to receive them. Otherwise, we'll be exporting high quality talent as we usually do. I'll wrap up by mentioning that all of this was possible by investing in people first. We were able to amass industry leaders, experienced researchers, academics, driven practitioners, and purpose-driven professionals who are highly qualified, all by first looking into the idea of the individual and investing and mentoring in them, and making sure that we put intellectual capital first. So I'll wrap up there, and thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Calvin Marks. Excellent presentation there again. And some of the things that you've mentioned, I can relate with. And I think one of the puzzling things you might find coming out basically from your presentation, at least in the discussion session, is the notion of the infrastructure. So you have the human capital, but what about the infrastructure? You know, for developing countries like Guyana and those in the Caribbean, the infrastructure is oftentimes absent. You might find people trying to engage this aspect here in the question and answer segment. So, ladies and gentlemen, you heard from three distinguished panelists speaking of different areas as we address the notion of ICT development and inclusiveness. And so I want to turn our attention to our question and answer segment, and we have a team that is actually working on the question and answer segment. I will introduce the team. We have Mr. Garindra Prasad, who's helping out. We have Mr. Dwayne Renville, providing some strong support. And leading that team, we have Ms. Aurel Liddell. So the question and answer segment will last for about 45 minutes. And I would just like to call upon the presenters, just in case there was something that you want to highlight that you didn't get to highlight during your presentation. Maybe you can also take an opportunity to take a swing at it. I want to open the question and answer segment from a question from one of our cohort, Mr. Prasad, Garindra Prasad. And his question is directed to all of the panelists. And I'll begin with, so I'll go with ladies before gentlemen. And so I'll start with Dr. Michael, then I'll go to Dr. Eusebio, and then I'll come to Mark. So the question for the presenters is as follows. From a design perspective, how can ICT be designed to promote equal access, quote unquote, inclusiveness? So I will ask Dr. Michael take the lead on this question here.
What a wonderful question, because so much of what we are building is causing digital divides, and you're asking the opposite, really trying to address the adoption and diffusion and accessibility and affordability of new technologies. And so what we don't want to do is introduce technologies that have ripple effects causing inequality. We don't wish to create technologies that create injustices or are discriminatory. And depending on the theoretical approach you take, whether it's one of technological determinism or one of social shaping of technology or one of praxistemology, where you say it's neither technological determinism or only alone social shaping, it's all of these forces put into play once a technology is rolled out, that we can't prejudge or preempt ethics in a particular design of a system or a technology. It all depends on which approach you take and what you believe. One thing I do know is that we don't have universal access to technologies. And we see this when we come together in calls like this, where sometimes our broadband is lacking in reliability or availability. And we know some basic things about accessibility. So why is it when I look at telegeographic telecommunication maps, as I did, and I studied them intricately to look at originating traffic points and terminating traffic, I would always see the fat lines coming in and out of the Five Eyes nations, the UK, USA, Australia, and so forth, Canada. and tiny, tiny little lines coming out, incoming and outgoing from Africa and South America and other places. Why? Why was that the case? Was it about what? Information equals knowledge equals traffic equals economic prosperity? Yes. Simple as that. I have access to information, then I can produce information, I can share information. That traffic means there's transactions happening between places. But the digital divide seems to be growing, in fact, even though we believe and we say that we intervene in this way to close this gap. The chasm in some places is growing, and we may see that through innovation potentially, if economic factors are not taken into consideration, we may see multiple digital divides. We might see those with an empowerment of new technologies in personal area networks, for example, beyond these large scale wide area networks or metropolitan area networks as we see diffuse. So accessibility sometimes does mean some communities are more marginalized than others. So I'll hold off other comments and over to Eldon and Eusebio.
Right.
Dr. Eusebio, can I?
Yeah, sure.
Go ahead.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Thank you for the question, and thank you, Katina, for making my job easy. I think one of the key elements here that we need to look at is when we think about access, we need to look further. What happens after access? So the key element that happens here is to first look from a design perspective to actually get the stakeholders that are going to be affected by this technology to understand it. I absolutely love the work that Eldon is doing. And it kind of really connected to another entrepreneur in Ghana that I work with that is doing a very similar kind of initiative. And the interesting thing is not only creating a workforce there, but even projects that are coming from USAID and Ford Foundation and other big Gates Foundation and so forth are actually being able to be locally sourced, not only creating jobs, but actually people who understands the context. So the key elements here, I see two things. One is you need to get the people who's going to be using. Remember, you don't want people in an air conditioning room with flavored sparkling water to be designing and determining, how technology is developing, what functions will have to people in Macola market or in the Recife favela down in Brazil. The other element, but once that is, this is the inclusion. But more importantly is, you put this inclusion, and if this inclusion does not come with actually skills and with actually awareness of the outcomes, it actually can do more harm than good. So you need to look at way beyond the adoption phase or the access phase, but really what the outcomes are coming there.
Yeah, I agree. Just building on your comments, granted, thinking about technology in itself, it has this inherent ability to empower and to provide this great equalizer, but access is the real challenge. Once that access is provided and building on top of that, I would go as far as to suggest early stage programs to sensitize youth with regards to how technologies can possibly play a role in everyday life in certain applications. And once those children are able to get that seed planted in their minds, then it just takes hold organically from there. And then they'll be able to understand even more as they grow, and they'll be able to innovate and apply and even inform their elders about ways in which technology can be used. So in terms of using technology to provide equal access, it's a matter of ensuring that once access and infrastructure is laid down, they're complementing programs to sensitize the youth. And then those programs should extend all the way from early education to industry to ensure that we have this proper uptake.
Thank you, panelists. Aurel, can I call upon you to check in on what is happening with the questions from the floor?
Certainly. So we have a question from Ellie, and it reads, how can we, as accurately as possible, forecast or predict the unintended consequences for certain technologies and try to mitigate the negatives before we start using the technologies. Do you think that we can reach a certain checklist or simulator to serve this purpose? And this question is addressed to all the panelists.
Let's go different order. Eusebio or Eldon?
Well, let's start with Eldon then. I don't mind.
Okay, fair enough. Yeah, we can keep switching that around. Well, what I'm thinking of is the idea is to, I'm drawing a blank at the moment. So, well, Arl, if I can ask you to just recap the question so that I can really map over.
Just for some clarity, Candace, you can check the chat also. I think the questions are there. So just in the event that you probably want to get a refresher of the question.
Okay.
Eldon, would you like
or
me
you can ask for a repeat.
And then,
well,
Eldon,
okay,
I'm more than happy to, if you want to.
No, I can begin. I just had a momentary blank out there, but what I can offer in terms of this particular question is that, and it takes me to when we think about AI technology, and there's a lot of discussion around having policy be put in place to ensure that AI technology does not get misused in any way, shape, or form. But then there's this controversial consideration in the sense that if policy goes in too early, then it may constrain innovation with the technology itself. Where I stand under the circumstances is that the point is that we can't necessarily predict every possible misuse or outcome. While there is this fine line that we need to navigate in terms of balancing constraints that are put in place to ensure that innovation still takes place, we still need to respect the organic process in terms of having the technology be used, and then we sort of respond accordingly in turn. In summary, the idea is that we want to have that balance between just letting everything happen fully organically, and putting measures in place too early. So it's about understanding enough about the domain to be able to offer a framework, certain parameters, but not strict parameters in terms of control, to still permit innovation and things to unfold organically for us to identify what are the possible outcomes. And then we respond or build on top of that framework to go from there.
Terrific. So in my view, I mean, the key element here, I think, having a checklist, I think, is very hard in my view. For each context is different, and the type of the technology that you are developing, and who are going to be the end users, and what are you trying to achieve, what sort of outcomes you are foreseeing. But I think there are two key principles here. One is to understand the context and have a clear idea of what are the outcomes, not only the performance gain that you're trying to do, but the broader outcomes on that. The second one is to have the end users, if you want to call that, or the public that is going to be affected by technology as co-designers of that technology. A number of times that I've been involved in ICT 4D projects, I see the local population or the target population is being used almost as a test bed, on the sense that the technology is insular designed somewhere else with other people, and then it's thrown over there, and so basically there's no alignment there. So I think those are to me two key elements. One is the focus on outcomes, understanding the context that this is happening, and have the people as co-designers rather than end users, because the lack of alignment there, there are numbers of stories that we could share the entire day, and many others that have been involved into this, of this completely misalignment between the global south and the north coming in and with magic devices that absolutely has no use into the context that is going to be applied.
Great comments preceding, and so I won't double up any of those aspects except to say technology is dual use, it always is, and who is in control and who are the users is a very big thing here. Communities who wish to be empowered by technology will never shoot themselves in the foot, so to speak. They're not going to take a technology on board that will impact them and their community and their families, right? We've got to get down to that level. We cannot see users as being over there. I can sort of see them. In fact, I can use my GIS on my desktop and I can see how many people there are, what the density is of a particular area, what the local zonings are, what the propensity to pay for new services, because that's exactly what I did with 3G network rollouts back in 2002. I sat in an office, I did something over there, I had fantastic visibility of statistics and science, I had no visibility of culture. I had no visibility of religious beliefs and all the other wonderful things that you've written in your white paper, team. You talked about all of these things. If I go to my last slides, you talked about things that are not considered, but that are so important to a setting. And so I want to talk about that. I want us to talk about the local beliefs, the local conditions, the local cultures, the local traditions, the local behaviors. Because otherwise what I'm doing is I'm mass producing for maximum effect. And it's all about revenues, forgive me, but that's how big tech giants do think. I know because I was a senior person in one of these organizations back when it was one of the largest companies in the world. And so when you are looking at this phenomenon, we're not thinking about customers, we're thinking about people. And I want you to start thinking about the people around you, your immediate family, your friends, the connections of friends, your community where you go on a weekend to congregate together, even though this is happening less and less as an impact of technology, which we probably couldn't have even forecasted if we wanted to. The fact that if we created something that allowed us to call each other, would we see each other less and not more? Well, I don't know. It depends on the context. It depends whether I go into a little country like Anguilla, where I saw the change happen in 2015. They had no Wi-Fi, all of a sudden had Wi-Fi. And you had children with tablets glued to the screen outside in little sort of outdoor settings. And you would see these large pieces of writing, Wi-Fi here, Wi-Fi at the shopping center, Wi-Fi at the gym, Wi-Fi here. Why Wi-Fi? Who asked the Anguillans? At the same time, how will Anguilla create a bigger originating and terminating point of traffic, as I mentioned in my talk, of information flows? I can garner economic prosperity. I can tell the world, hey, I'm this little tiny island in the Caribbean. I'm 14,000 people. I have 28 churches. We have diversity and harmony in our people. How can I tell the world about this beautiful destination for travel and this beautiful cultural traditions that we have in our country and where we came from and the fact that we have some Anguillans who are doing incredible things abroad? And can you sponsor us? Can you help us with our education? Can you help us get to America or to Australia or to China so that we can lift our education? Or how do we do it here? Come. We invite you to come. The problem is when we look at technology as shiny gadgetry, friends, I'm going to leave you with one big thing. It's not about this. It's the processes behind this. So we can have innovators saying, I want to mass produce 7 billion, one person for each, whereas the saturation point has reached beyond 100% in places like Hong Kong. 1.3 for each person, 1.3 mobiles for each person. We are taking out different mobiles with different ears, for our different ears and maybe for our eyes. How many people have phones, screen, other services coming at them? That's the unintended consequences, that we look above, we think about the mental model forming in our brain and we go, I'm not challenging the status quo here. This is the problem, friends. The unintended consequences come when we become dumb because we're dumbified by the screens. And we're not going, now, what's my mental model of the world? What world do I want to live in? Do I really need this extra phone, this extra screen? Or do I need a process that helps me feed my family, a process where I have a roof over my head? And that's what I want to look at. Technology away from shiny gadgetry, which will enable, they're enablers, friends. But the process behind the tech is what we're really talking about.
Amazing, amazing responses. Aurel, you still have the floor. I know you're overwhelmed with all the questions that are coming your way. It's a very exciting topic to be talking about ICT, to be talking about development, but more so the inclusive aspect of development.
Certainly. So we have a question from Salo, and the question reads, is there evidence that cooperatives intrinsically produce more inclusive technologies? If yes, how can the grassroots organizations improve their success? And should we redefine what is success or what success is?
Okay, so I should go first now. Very good question, Salah. Thank you. Well, the first thing we need to look at here is it depends how this cooperative is actually developing whatever is developing and what problems they're trying to solve. So the power structure within the community, it plays a big role into this. So if I'm thinking, Salah is asking this question, I'm thinking, social cryptocurrencies, I'm thinking kind of Banco Palmas versus, Lend Up here in the US, and completely different structures there, completely different power structures, completely different goals they're trying to be achieved. So at the end of the day, when you're thinking into this, you really need to be able to look beyond, not put the community as a community is better if the community is able to really use that. But even bringing a point that Katina was mentioning early, so a lot of times there is a techno-determinism and a techno-solutionism that comes into this, that you need this, this is what you need, and I've seen communities, for example, in southern Mexico, that the priorities are completely different from this. So if we would be able to use technology, for example, to raise some funds to start providing clear water, we probably would provide much better impact, and then move to different things, right? Because to be honest, the project, for example, was to create a lab into that community, because people came with a solution to that community, right? To create a lab where they could train it, great. But let me ask a question: if the kids are all sick, how can you train them, right? There's no electricity there. I think someone was asking a question: how can you train them? So the first thing when you look into communities is, are the power structure and the problems that this community is able to express or to be identified, are problems of the community, or problems of a subset of people, or problems that somebody is looking for a solution, right? So I think somebody made a comment that I love. I use that all the time. If you have a hammer, everything looks like a nail. So every single problem of every single community can be solved by this, and that. So I think the key element here is really first listening, right? And try to understand, how can we collaborate? How can we participate? And the most dangerous word that I see in any project is when people start to use the word them or they. When I do a project that I hope I'll be able to continue at ASU, that I take students all over the world to work with startups, right? And Alden, hopefully you can do that. And the first thing my students will learn is, the moment that you say them or they, it's automatic F in the course, right? And that's the key element here. So when we think about the community, we need to understand the community, participate, and if we get into this community, that community should be us.
Okay, do I go next? All right, so I'm thinking intrinsic to cooperatives. I'm thinking along the lines of the mindset, the prevailing mindset in co-ops, and I believe that there are two schools of thought mainly. There is this competitive mindset, and then there's this collaborative mindset. And I believe cooperatives have this intrinsic collaborative mindset, and as a result, they will naturally tend to more inclusive technologies, I believe. And when it comes to having grassroots organizations, how can they improve this success? That would depend on a number of factors. That would depend on the prevailing environment in which these organizations are set up. It would also depend on other that may assist them along the way in terms of funding and opportunities, and their overall access to these opportunities in terms of having these technologies take root and then materialize and then move into place where they should. And in terms of redefining what is success under the circumstances, it's just a matter of for any co-op or any organization that's operating within that space, it's about impact. So I believe success there is defined by how they can measure the impact that these innovations through these technologies can make. So yeah, I think intrinsically, yes, they will tend towards inclusive technologies, and the prevailing environment will determine that success, and success it translates to impact. Yeah.
Eldon, I was very happy to see this vibrant community in Guyana forming. And what it shows me again is this connectivity and this synthesis, which is so required in co-design. It's a thread. It's connected or connective tissue. And again, grassroots, we go back to those words that are in this initial paper that the team have created. I also want to go and shift and say, who listens to cooperatives? Think about the shops in your local town that are called cooperatives. It's only really the people that frequent them that get it. It's the people that are in there sharing their goods and services that get them. Because the cooperatives have been drowned out by the big tech corporations. And the power imbalance is so huge. Although the value, let's just go back to here, the reality. The value of these cooperatives in communities is massive. The community here that has a cooperative that wants to sell goods that they make with their own hands, whether it's candles or it's honey that's come and they've harvested pumpkins from their backyard, whatever it is, they come and they cooperate together, they share a space together. There's a harmony about them. But really, does Google care? Does Facebook care about the cooperative in downtown Kiama, this little town with 500 people or 2,000 people? And cooperatives seem to thrive in regional and rural areas. They don't seem to fire up in urban centers. That's because there's too much noise in urban centers. Our urban space is not designed to let cooperatives thrive. There's so many people around. There's so many businesses. Who can afford to be the loudest on the internet? Who has the ingenuity to know to go to Google and get AdWords and get the SEO working on the page and get their product at #1, or on Facebook and get the subscribers? So what you're dealing with is the difference between selling and living. I want us to go away from selling and I want us to go towards living. And this is a mental shift. Thank you, Google, for the infrastructure you provide. Who provided the infrastructure free in Anguilla? Free? What's free? Is the cooperative free? Is big tech services free? Free. I sell you free so I can have you. Forget this selling. Go towards living. I exchange these services because I want you to have the best life possible. I want you to have the best chance possible. When I was a little child, my mother used to have this saying, which was, just say we got something at school or something good happened to us. She was very humble. She wouldn't even look at our reports sometimes. Not because you got A's, or it was never like that. They were uneducated, right? They never had that chance because of World War II and other reasons. So it was rather, may everyone else's children prosper before my own. I was like, what? May everyone else's kids prosper and then my own? What craziness is this, Mum and Dad? You want everyone else's kids to prosper before your own. Why? Because they knew something fundamental from their village, where they had nothing to eat at times. They knew something. If everyone's neighbor prospers, we lift each other up. In the cooperative, it's about lifting. It's about saying, I give you this, I will share this with you. It's altruistic. It's a generosity. It's going beyond selling. Where's this selling stuff come from? Yes, Capitalism is not about selling, folks. You go back to the theory of capitalism. It hasn't got to do with ripping you off. That's not capitalism. Let's go back to the economics and to understand where we've come from. And so I say, yes, more cooperatives. How do we plant them in urban centers where there are urban spaces for cooperatives? And how do these cooperatives serve the communities and actually say, you can do without Google, or Google, come to the table, come and talk to us, come and give us services. Don't buy us out, don't drown us out, Twitter, don't create hashtags that we can't overcome. And how do we come to an understanding where we use these giant, wonderful things we've built, which were coming out of garages, friends, right? This notion of startup, where did it come from, friends? .com era, right? We saw the people who were in the garage become massive media machines. Murdochs of this world were saying in the 70s, the media mogul, I want a fair newspaper industry. I want fair. I don't want someone to dominate. And what happened? Domination. Same with the guys and girls in the garages. They weren't thinking 1 billion computers to sell or 1 billion networks or 1 billion Google services. They weren't thinking that, but that's what's happened. So we have to go and stand back and go, okay, how do they share what they have? They have the best of the best. How do we learn from that? And how do our cooperatives start breathing? Because the cooperatives are at the coalface. They're the ones, when someone is dying in a community, they're going to come and feed you and come and fetch from 40 kilometers away clean drinking water for you. Or if you've got dysentery, they're going to try and, the person who has the most knowledge in the town will come and help you cleanse yourself of the dysentery if that's possible. We don't have that in urban centers because people don't even know each other in an apartment complex, friends. So something's got to change. Our mental model's got to change.
Thank you, Dr. Michael. So just to swing the conversation a little bit, there's a question from Chris Barton. And this question can be, well, any of the panelists can take this question. We're paying attention to the time. There's a saying, when we have a hammer, every problem looks like a nail. ICT is great for resolving some problems, but how can we understand which problems are not well addressed with ICT? And how do we avoid seeing ICT as a panacea? Any panelists can start.
Okay, I can give it a shot. Thanks, Chris. I think one of the key elements here is to really, as I mentioned initially in my talk, is to look at the affordances. And when we talk about affordances, affordance comes to the interaction of the end user and the technology, right? And really understand what it does, what outcomes it will create, and trying to look at it rather than coming with a lot of times the purpose is the technology. Like, we want to have internet, we want to have 5G, we want to have Wi-Fi. But for what? And what are you going to do there? And what is the outcomes they're trying to achieve? So I think the key element here is that there are problems that cannot, or it's not that cannot, but there are other means to solve the problem much easier. As someone that continuously teases me that I don't mention a lot my background in engineer, and I'm married to an engineer, and I tease them, engineers, including myself, a lot of times tend to scratch the ear like that because this is too easy, anyone can do it, right? So a lot of times, what do we have to be careful here is that, continues laughing, is that the purpose of the innovation that you're trying to create is not, basically the adoption of that technology or the technology per se, right? You really need to see what outcomes are you trying to look and how and what we're trying to achieve. And sometimes, and this goes back, I think, even to my undergrad days, when I was doing a program that was called Junior Consulting. So we would work with SMEs. And there was this small mechanic shop down in Brazil, and they wanted to buy a PC, a 286 back in the day, to do some management there. And I looked at them and I said, you know what? You don't have basically the money to buy that, right? Your cash flow is not this. And you know what we did? We got a whiteboard with magnets that actually fulfill 100% the process, right? And that ability of what I call frugal innovation, and that ability to look at it, beyond the technology as the mean is actually what you're trying to achieve. So at the end of the day, don't get in love with the shiny box, because it's very seductive, very, very much so. Anyway, that's my 2 cents on this.
All right, I guess I can pitch in now. So this particular question, it takes me to the scenario in which persons are very enthralled with AI, and they're asking. I mean, we often get the questions like, "I'd like to enhance this with AI," and I'm like, "Okay, well, take a moment. What is the problem that you're trying to solve? I know AI is all fancy and everything, and it seems it's everywhere, but let's take a look at the problem." So I believe that's where it starts, to just understand a certain process in terms of decomposing the problem first, just respecting that particular process. And as Eusebio mentioned, not get too caught up in the shiny box. And once you're able to truly understand the problem, the gap, then we can work from there to identify whether ICT would be a good fit to address that problem. So that's the process that I'd recommend to steer clear of this issue.
Thanks, Ellen. So we have a question. I'm pulling one from among my cohort that speaks to, continues the discussion on grassroots innovation. And this is from Diana. She asks, what are some strategies to promote ICT adoption as a value creation tool to encourage entrepreneurship in rural communities, like the indigenous communities here in Guyana? Ellen, you can perhaps take a stab at that one.
Okay, well, the thing with that is, I think it goes back to my earlier comment. It's important to ensure that there's a proper outlay of infrastructure and other implements to support such a delivery of service, just to get individuals adopting and using it appropriately. Rural communities here, of course, that's a tricky thing, because I know we're still a bit behind in terms of the supporting infrastructure to ensure that those individuals within the rural communities make proper use of the services that technology will bring. I know that bandwidth is still very expensive, so that's another major consideration in terms of those rural communities. So that's one major hurdle. As long as the infrastructure is there, the second step would be ensuring that they get the proper guidance and mentorship. So exposure is critical after that particular hurdle is passed. Ensuring that they're able to access the individuals who are able to transfer that knowledge and guide them along that way in terms of setting up their operation. So that's pretty much the 1-2 punch in terms of addressing that particular challenge. Infrastructure first, exposure second, and yeah.
Thank you, Ellen. So we have one more question from and this can be taken by any of the panelists as well. Can ICTs enable individuals to change power structures that keep them marginalized? This question is from Omnia. Shall I read it again?
It's a great question. We're all thinking deeply about that. Often, well, I said before, technology is dual use. It's also a double-edged sword. By having a presence online, you may make yourself a target online. unless you have some very good mentorship and education behind you about strategies in the online world. Collectively, the marginalized together can certainly act in a coherent way to raise awareness about their plight. But when technology is built for the masses, not for the marginalized, it becomes very difficult to use a tool that was created for most people, but not you. So let's think about these groups. And there's a passage that I shared with my class. I wrote it for my class. And it gets to the heart of what you're asking in that wonderful question. But if I said to you, technologies were not built for the disabled, technologies were not built for non-English speaking persons predominantly, technologies were not built for those who in context believe in the wrong religious orientation, inverted commas, wrong. Technologies were not built for the people with the pink hair or the blue hair or the black skin or the brown skin or the yellow skin or the olive skin or the redneck or the one with tattoos all over his body or the one with the implants that we can't see. They weren't built for the illegal immigrant. They weren't built for the refugee. They weren't built for the one who can't add. They weren't built for children. They weren't built for the aged. They weren't built for the poor because they can't afford them. So this is the problem. We've got technologies that were built for the masses to make the maximum bang for the buck, profit maximization. They weren't built. There was no design justice in the building of the internet. It came from a military construction. Same with IoT. Same with RFID. Same with global positioning systems, right? The fact that you can use it doesn't mean it was built for you. They just realized how they could commercialize. And this is ingrained in the military industrial complex. I research and operate for war. I can spin off that technology and make it commercial. I can make money from it. But hang on, it was a war technology. If I said to you, who owned YouTube? Go back and check. If I said to you, who owned Google Maps? Go and check. Google Maps. Hang on, it helps you to get from A to B. It's fantastic. Yes, it is fantastic. Who built it? Why did they build it? Where did it come from? One way to turn us inside out is to say, we used to door knock on people's doors and say, what do you think about marketing of X and Y? And then we used to call up and say, hello, I'm calling you at 6 o'clock. I'm interrupting your dinner. Can you tell me, could you answer this 2-minute survey? And then we said, don't worry about that. We'll just create something called the internet. People will spill their guts completely and publicly. And Facebook, even better. We even know who the social network communities are. Right? That's the cynical me talking. I was in the flux of this over-provisioning of services to particular nation states. So I'm going to say power structures are very hard to break out unless it's a collective effort.
Okay.
Alan, Mark, go ahead.
Yeah. Just quickly about it. I got into thinking about the power structures just globally, and what I found is that there are certain parts of the world where technology is actually withheld by the power structures because they want to maintain that certain marginalization. So just making an inference there, ICTs can enable persons to challenge those power structures traditionally because of the very nature of certain types of ICTs. Information is a dangerous thing if it's shared to the masses, and if the masses contribute to their own edification. And the powers that be understand this, and I believe the way the world is going is that they're threatened by it under the circumstances. This is why certain nations ensure that they meter the access to information, they meter access to technologies to keep people subjugated. So, yeah.
Right. And I think a key element here, thank you, Eldon and Katina, for this, is to understand the the key element, I think, is to look at value creation and value appropriation. How this actually, because of the nature of this, what what is the dream of many startups? To be bought out by, by somebody. So you see this mega, organizations basically incorporating that. So, in a very short answer, can individuals change the power structures that keep them marginalized? Only with a collective action. I agree that with Katina, because the nature of it is actually to concentrate power. And if the flows of information and the structures are there, then it becomes extremely hard to change, because there is this unbalance of, so having the access and having the ability to create and distribute doesn't mean that you have actually a balanced between value creation and appropriation. So the data that you're creating, it's creating value to whom? To you. So.
Ladies and gentlemen, presenters, thank you for such a stimulating and thought-provoking session. Certainly, the time allotted for this discussion was extremely short. There's a lot of questions coming in, but unfortunately, because of the time constraint, we will not be able to get to them. What I want to do is to provide the closing remarks, basically bring the things together discussed by the presenters, and then I'll ask my colleague, Mr. Chhetri, to close with the thanks. In terms of bringing things together, what did we hear today? Coming out from Dr. Eusebio's presentation, make the argument that new integrated focus of computing has created pervasive digital ecosystem, and the advances in ICTs disrupt how we do things in society. And we need to look beyond the shiny box, as he mentioned. And the argument here is that these technologies have created the paradox of openness. So we have to be mindful of the spillover effects that comes about, or the negative externalities, we would say, that comes about when we generate these technologies. From Dr. Michael argued that we lived in a very complex system, which is also adaptive. The systems are no longer viewed as closed systems, they're open. And one of the most important things that we need to ask ourselves when we're especially designing system for inclusive development is, how do we find out what everyone wants? And in answering such a question, we need to ensure that we're actively listening and designing. Some key ideas to pay careful attention to is ensuring that we have this grassroots, bottom-up approach, community-led inclusion or inclusiveness in the. Mr. Marx helped us to talk about. He talked about the local context in Ghana here, where he was able to highlight and zoning on a couple of the challenges that we in Ghana are facing, or were facing in the advancement of our ecosystem. And two of the important challenges that he mentioned was the deficit in collaboration and the global market penetration. The argument in terms of addressing this, based on what he would have articulated, was the development of a ecosystem growth model. And what was interesting about this presentation is that he spoke about training individuals, building human capital through the apprenticeship program. What he argued also was that you need to have collaboration, especially with foreign partners. This will help with the diffusion of technology through learning. It will help with the growth of revenues. And he made the argument that whilst we build human capital, especially in developing countries or emerging countries, that the government needs to find a way to confront or to find opportunities to bridge the gap between the skills and the skill set that will be generated from these training and opportunities. Because if such is not available, you'll find that people will move other places. You'll be exporting their talent. So ladies and gentlemen, this is your moderator, thanking you for your patience, thanking you for your time. And I hope that the session was very entertaining and stimulating at the same time for you, where you would have take away a lot of new and exciting information discussing ICT development altogether. Now I would like to call on my colleague, Mr. Patrick Edwaru, to deliver the vote of thanks and bring the session to an end. Thank you again, and please stay safe.
Good afternoon, good evening, and good morning, because I know we're all over the world. It is my pleasure and honor to give the vote of thanks on behalf of the IGD cohort team. I convey our sincere gratitude to everyone for your participating in this informative session. And it really was very informative, I can tell you that. First, our prestigious panelists, Professor Eusebio, Dr. Katina, and good friend of mine, Eldon. Thank you for taking the time off from your hectic schedules to share your insight, knowledge, expertise, and experiences, which have helped us to now have a wider and deeper perspective of the issues that you have so excellently discussed. Thank you. It was extremely enlightening. To our ASU technical team, Cindy, Melissa, and all the others lending support in the background. Once again, your excellent guidance and support has led to yet another successful event. You make us look good. Thank you for an excellent job. To Professor Netra Chhetri, we can't forget you. Thank you for the dedication and guidance you have given to us to see us through this process. You ensured every detail was examined and eventualities planned for. I believe you have taught us much about the skill set we should develop to become excellent scholars and thought leaders. We are most grateful to you. To our audience, thank you for your spirited participation. It's a pity we didn't have more time to get to your questions, especially with this excellent team panel that we have here. This only enhanced the situation and the occasion. Thank you so much. To my colleagues and classmates, you have done an excellent and outstanding job in planning and executing this event. Great job. And thank you all to everyone. Those of you who I may have missed, it was not a deliberate oversight. And with this now, I say thank you again, and I call this session dismissed. Thank you.